Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is after 5:30 on the 12th of September, and so we shall begin. We will open with the flag salute. Please rise, put your hands over your heart, and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Reverend Karen Wade will now give us the invocation.
Let us pray. God, our Governor, we ask your blessing on those who assemble here this evening for the Rockport Town Meeting. We ask that you grant wisdom and grace to those in administrative authority, those who serve on town committees or hold public office, and to those who will be casting votes. In our discussions and decisions, may we demonstrate courage and foresight to provide justly for all the people of our town. Almighty God, you proclaim your truth in every age by many voices. We ask that you direct those who speak where many listen. Grant to all of us discerning minds, inspire our quest for unity with an equal measure of respect for human diversity. Send down upon this evening a spirit of charity, justice, and integrity, that we may be led to wise decisions which will promote the well-being of all those who live and work in our town. And finally, gracious God, we remember especially before you this evening the poor and neglected persons whom it would be easy for us to forget, the homeless and the destitute, the old and the sick, the unemployed, and all who suffer from injustice, and those who have no one to care for them. Ever-loving God, source of all wisdom and understanding, guide us to perceive what is right and grant us both the wisdom to pursue it and the grace to carry it through. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to omit the reading of the articles in the warrant. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now hear from our town clerk, Melanie Waddell, who will read the officer's return on the warrant. But before she comes up, I would like to introduce her assistant, Courtney Buchanan. Welcome.
Speaking right into the microphone.
Speaking right into the microphone. Right into it. I can lean in.
I, Daniel J. Mahoney, Constable of the Town of Rockport, have on this date, August 24th, 2022, posted the Fall Town Meeting warrant for the Fall Town Meeting to be held Monday, September 12th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. at the Rockport High School in the 2 post offices, the town bulletin board, and 17 other public places throughout the town, including 3 in Precinct 1, 3 in Precinct 2, and 3 in Precinct 3. Signed, Daniel J. Mahoney. Received August 24th, 2022 in the town clerk's office at 3:23 p.m. Melanie J. Waddell, town clerk.
Okay, our meeting tonight will be conducted in accordance with parliamentary procedure. Can everybody hear me? How about now? Good evening. Our meeting tonight will be conducted in accordance with parliamentary procedure as described in Section 4, Chapter 2 of our town bylaws, Mass General Law, Robert's Rules of Procedure, as interpreted by our wonderful town meeting time. First, the subject of discussion will always be a pending motion and not the warrant article itself. With respect to each article, our town administrator, Mitch Vieira, will read the motion. It will be seconded, perhaps explained by the proponent or by Mitch as a proxy. If appropriate, we'll hear from the chairman of one of our committees tonight, either Phil Crotty of the Community Preservation Committee, Laurie Kaiser, chair of the Government and Bylaw Committee, or Dwight Valentine, chairman of FinCom, or a member of their committee. The advisory committee will state the committee recommendations and the reasoning for those recommendations. Perhaps we'll hear from the Board of Selectmen as appropriate. Then we will start debate and discussion, and eventually voting. To speak, please get my attention. Melanie, Courtney, and I will scour the room for folks with their hands raised. Once recognized, go to a microphone. There's one here, and there's one in back. You can even line up if you wish, but please don't start speaking until recognized, and when you do speak, please state your name and your street address, at least the first time. You must address all comments through the chair. We don't condone conversations, so if you ask a question, even if you think that requires a follow-up, we have a lot of people we have to listen to tonight, so don't assume that you will get that. The bylaw says that there is preference given to people who have not spoken on an issue. When I sense you're ready to vote, I will state the question, either quoting or paraphrasing as required a pending motion. That will be a warning debate is ending. You may be recognized after that only if you don't understand what the issue is or what a yes or no means. That's the time. Once we start to vote, any discussion is out of order. We are guests tonight of the school department, and smoking is not permitted anywhere on school property or even on planet Earth. Ask you to be a good guest in that regard. Related articles are as follows. B, which logically is coming before A tonight, and B, A, and F, C through E, and then all the bylaw articles, and it's going to go in this order: I, N, J, K, L, and M, and G is not related to anything else. It will stand alone. Unless I have an objection, I plan to go in the order I just stated, which will more or less follow your warrant. And we are going to have, this meeting is going to conclude tonight. We're going to end with the bylaws, and we're going to get as far as we can with them. Hopefully we can get through all of them, but if not, we'll be able to continue with that bylaw review a little bit later at another meeting. As you may know, the bylaw committee is now charged with reviewing and reporting on the bylaws every 5 years, so it's just like painting a bridge. Their work never really finishes, so there'll always be time to have your bylaw reviewed. Any questions? Great. Chair will entertain a motion under Article B.
Dwight Valentine moves that the town amend the votes taken under Articles 5A, 5A, 5B, 5C, 6, 6A, and/or 6B of the April 2nd, 2022 annual town meeting by transferring the sums set forth in the September 13th, 2022 Fall Town Meeting Voters Booklet for Article B motion on page 39 and the amounts and for the purposes specified therein. Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee support this article.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, we're going to just practice with the clicker just to make sure. If you want to vote yes, you're going to hit A, which is also 1. And if you want to vote no, you will hit B, which is also 2. Ready? Begin. Okay, it appears that that motion carries by a mere 93% of the vote. We move on to Article A, which does require 9/10 or 90%.
Mr. Moderator, Selectman Chair Ross Brackett moves that the town appropriate and transfer the sums set forth in the September 12th, 2022 Fall Town Meeting Voters Booklet for Article A on pages 38, all for the purpose of paying unpaid bills and adjustments from the previous fiscal year. Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee support this article.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor press A or 1. Opposed press B or 2. Starting now. And we have 97 in favor and 3% opposed, which is greater than 9/10. So that passes. We now move on to F. Yes? The actual numbers. And I just got new glasses, too. 181 to 5. F is in Foxtrot.
Mr. Moderator, Selectwoman Sarah Wilkinson moves that the town appropriate and confirm the sum of $74,170 that was previously appropriated to the Labor Reserve account to fund the labor costs for the first year of the collective bargaining agreements between the town of Rockport and AFSCME Council 93, Local 1679, Supervisors and Foreman Unit, and General Unit, and to designate that the sum of $35,569 will come from taxation, the sum of $26,627 will come from the water enterprise, and the sum of $11,974 will come from the sewer enterprise. Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee support this article.
Seconded.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, we'll change it up a little bit. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. That motion carries, and it was unanimous. Now we go on to Article C, as in Charlie. Not you, Charlie.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Chair Phil Crotty moves that the town hear and receive the report of the Community Preservation Committee. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this article.
Moved and seconded. Colonel?
Thank you, Colonel Visnick, select persons, and Community Preservation Committee members. I'm Philip Crotty, and I'm chairman of the Rockport Community Preservation Committee. I am presenting this evening in accordance with Town of Rockport Bylaws, Chapter 2, Section 5D, which calls for CPC recommendations. This year, commencing January 2022, was a successful year for the Community Preservation Committee. We are recommending this evening that you approve 8 projects totaling $1,080,800. We received 11 requests totaling more than $2 million, but several were withdrawn. If all the applications are approved this evening, there will be $823,000 remaining in the Community Preservation Committee account. And with new revenues, we estimate that total funds available for 2023 applications will be approximately $2 million. We like to maintain a reserve of, say, $500,000 for a rainy day or a special project. From the inception of the Community Preservation Act in 2003 until the present, the Rockport Community Preservation Program has contributed more than $12 million to Rockport-worthy projects. We can fund 4 areas, and they are open space, which has received $1.9 million, recreation, which has received $1.8 million, historic preservation, which has received $6 million, and affordable housing, which has received $3.5 million. According to our treasurer, Mel Michaels, who, by the way, is not here this evening because he broke his ankle at Millbrook Meadow, but his wife June is here with us. Thank you, June. In any event, the appropriations for fiscal year 2022 were $1,205,792, which breaks down to 59.4%. Total appropriations include project expenditures, money for debt service, for the community house, and administration. The state match this year was 65.46%, and that match over the years has been 49.9% since 2003. We are especially proud this year to see that the Granite Street Crossing project of affordable housing, 23 units, has started construction. The Community Preservation Committee so far has contributed $470,000 to that project, and it will be up again for a little more money this evening. I want to acknowledge several persons who were especially helpful to the Community Preservation Committee this year. June Michaels, who arranged for the outstanding Community Preservation Committee infomercial at the local TV station, which can be seen on our website. Mel Michaels, who, as I said, is not with us this evening, but he is our diligent treasurer, and he took it upon himself to recall almost $300,000 of unused funds from prior projects. And Mr. John Hartle, who's not with us this evening, but he's our expert webmaster, and Larry Neal, who was our DPW representative for 3 years and who served with great wisdom and contribution. I also acknowledge Tom Barrett, the FinCom representative who attends all our meetings, and Herm Lillias, the Select Board liaison, who also attends all our CPC meetings. Now, I request that you receive my report in accordance with the bylaws, and then I'll turn over the presentation to our Community Preservation Committee Vice Chairman, Ruth George, who will vote on the various 8 projects which we are recommending this evening. All those in favor of gratefully receiving that report?
Anyone not grateful? I'm not grateful. All right. Go ahead. I know.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I called the town clerk's office this morning to discover if there was an actual copy of the report, which you've just heard. There is not. That's not a requirement. It certainly ought to be. You were given no notice of money that the committee has spent during the course of the year, distributed for things other than projects. These are administrative funds, which Phil Crotty referred to in passing. I attended the, I believe it was February meeting, at which they voted $9,950 to a housing trust for a study on affordable housing. The committee has the right to vote funds up to $10,000 without going to town meeting. No laws have been broken. They're on the right side of the law. But you can call it a princess, you can call it a pumpkin, you can call it a study. If it's $9,950, it's a project. They should bring it here for us to vote on it, whether or not we want it. So I object to that, and have objected to such studies before. This one was particularly objectionable, the money for the Housing Trust, because the Housing Trust that they gave the money to was at that point not legally incorporated, just a wish and a prayer, and there was no formal written application for the money. So the next thing is we'll be handing over the money, $100 bills to people in paper bags if we're pursuing such a course. So undoubtedly you all want to gratefully receive the report. I am ungrateful and intend to vote against it.
All those in favor of receiving, oh, somebody else. Yes. In the back.
Yes, Aziz Sepala, 92 Granite Street. I want to raise a point of personal privilege. It seems to me like everybody that's speaking here, they're in like a bass tone, and I just wondered if everybody else seemed to notice that, because I have a difficulty hearing lower frequencies, and it does seem to me like this microphones are on a lower frequency. And I'd just like to have some technical evaluation. Is there something different or not? Because even Toby didn't even sound as strident as maybe he usually does. So I'd like to know. I'm not hearing everything clearly.
I never thought I would say this, but I agree with you, Z. So I'm going to direct my comment to our technical folks in the back, and they are working the problem. What's that? No. No, we need the microphones. We need to record it, but we're trying to modulate it. So we do the best we can. That's right. This is not my favorite room. The acoustics are never good in here, but we're doing the best we can. Should I keep talking so you can adjust my voice, or are we good? Okay. All those in favor of receiving this report, please say aye. Aye. Opposed to receiving the report, say no. No. All right, the motion carries. We now move on to Article D's and Delta.
Mr. Moderator, first motion under Article D. CPC Chair Phil Crotty moves that $83,000 be transferred from FY23 estimated annual revenues of the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Preservation Fund Community Housing Reserve Account. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this motion.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Okay. I'll give the direction again when it's time next to vote. That's great. Okay, Phil. Please, we have to get through a long agenda. Okay, Phil. Go ahead. Yeah. You have any comments on it?
No, it's just an administrative issue that we have to get on with.
Okay. All right. Let's vote on the first article. If you are in favor of Article D, first, sum of money to be deposited in the Community Housing Reserve Account, press 1 on your clicker, and if you are opposed, press 2. Ready, go. Okay, that motion carries 77% to 29%. 23%. We move on to second. A sum of money to be deposited in the open space recreation reserve account. If you are in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Moderator, second motion. CPC Chair Phil Crotty moves that $83,000 be transferred from FY23 estimated annual revenues of the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Preservation Fund Open Space and Recreation Reserve Account. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? You've heard the motion. If you're in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. Yeah. All right. Yeah. It's going to take forever. 87% in favor, 13% opposed. 180 to 26. That passes. We move on to the third motion.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Chair Phil Crotty moves that $83,000 be transferred from FY23 estimated annual revenues of the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Preservation Fund Historic Preservation Reserve Account. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this article.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If you are in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. This motion passes. 85% in favor, 15% opposed. 173 to 30. And just in case you want to know, as of a few moments ago, we had 216 people check in. We now move on to Article E, or Echo.
Mr. Moderator, first motion, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $40,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation Open Space and Recreation Reserve Account to be expended under the direction of the Director of Public Works and DPW Commissioners, working with the Community Preservation Committee to study options for the restoration, rehabilitation, and/or preservation of Bradley Wharf. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this article.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ruth George. I'm the chairman of the CPC. Just want to tell you a little bit about the application for Bradley Wharf for the options study. Rockport DPW is looking for a professional study regarding the stabilization of Bradley Wharf and motive number 1. It is an old cobble-filled wharf composed of large granite stones and has the timber frame building motive number 1 atop. This study would be for evaluation, design, and permitting. They would look to have GZA, Geo Environmental Inc., as consult engineers. This structure is critical in the long-term preservation of our wharf and famous iconic motive. It has currently settlement and sinkhole issues with loss of aggregate around the building foundation. It sits on a concrete slab with apron stones. Some of the large face stones are displaced. This is all due to the constant tide pull and exacerbated by storm surge and increase in our coastal storms and climate changes. This project will also look at setting up erosion controls.
That's it? She's done?
Yep.
All right. You've heard the motion, which has been seconded. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor press 1 or A, and opposed press 2 or B, starting now. 89% in favor, 11% opposed. That passes. 191 to 23. We now move on to the second motion.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $239,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation, Community Open Space, and Recreation Reserve account to be expended under the direction of the Director of Public Works and DPW Commissioners, working with the Community Preservation Committee for the restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of Evans Field, including the bleachers. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this article.
Okay, Ruth, make your pitch.
Evans Field. This would be for rehab, restoration, and preservation of the outfield, diamonds, dugout, and bleachers. This property was donated to the town in 1929 by Mr. and Mrs. William Evans almost 100 years ago. It was built in the Depression era by the WPA. This area has been maintained by DPW and volunteers. They are looking at new backstops behind diamonds, new fencing and fence guards around fields and dugouts, new sod in the outfield, and to restore the wooden bleachers, finally, in the grandstands. Last year, the organization that runs Little League and youth softball raised funds and built covered dugouts, and the town covered the cost of some of the fencing in front of these. This is a very busy area that is utilized by youth soccer, Little League, town baseball, and the Vikings baseball practices and home games, and many other activities, including winter, day, and night sledding, and host to several large RHS reunions. It's time to get this restored. This application was submitted by Sarah Wilkinson, Jeff Proposki, and John Parisi. They've worked really hard on it. And I just want to read what the plaque says up there. It says that youth may know conflict without rancor, defeat without bitterness, and conquest without arrogance. That's what we're teaching our kids up there. So let's get it restored now. Thank you.
All right, any comments, questions? Yes.
Peter Goodwin's 6 North Road. You got it? Mr. Moderator, through you, I'd like to ask the audio people to increase the treble setting, decrease the bass setting, so that we can hear. The lady speaking up there should be able to, we should be able to hear her. She has a female voice, it's a high pitch. We should be able to hear the crisp sounds. We cannot. Thank you.
Okay.
There's a technical gentleman behind you. Let's let him do his thing.
To everybody here, I just want to make note that there's different factors going on with the audio in the room, number one. Number two, it's an echo chamber in here. If we turn up the volume, if we turn up the treble, the bass, we're going to get feedback because we're maxing out the volume level. If you can all hear me, you should all be able to hear anybody else speaking. From the diaphragm, you have to talk in a big voice, and you also have to talk very close to the microphones. This will create a very satisfactory listening experience for everybody. So I know when you do public speaking, it's very difficult. Sometimes our voices get very, very small. In tonight's meeting, I need everybody to speak up bold, strong, and with a little from the diaphragm, all right? So I apologize if we can't do any better. We're doing the best we can back there, and we'll continue to make adjustments throughout the meeting. So thank you.
Although it sounds funny, I wish you could turn down the bass. Turn down the bass. The bass is too heavy.
No, it's actually not. It's down.
No, it is. It's too heavy.
It's down.
Oh, my God.
So, okay. Sorry. My question is, on Evans Field, I'm sorry. My name is Daniel O'Donnell, and I'm at 52 Main Street. And the idea of Evans Field is wonderful, but I end up just wondering, how did they arrive at $239,000 to improve the field, and precisely what are we going to get for that? Thank you.
Anybody want to take a swing at that over here? Sarah?
Well, I think I'll start by saying,
Okay.
have you ever seen the grandstand up there? The old wooden benches that have been there probably for 100 years. That's where a lot of the money is going to go to, is restoring that huge, huge area. Sarah, did you want to say something also?
Microphone over at the Board of Selectmen?
No, he has to do it. I think is it on now?
Yep.
Great. Sarah Wilkinson from the Board of Selectmen, but I actually worked on this project with John Parisi and Jeff
Okay.
Propowski as a private resident. And I just want to take a brief moment to thank Jeff, because Jeff Propowski, along with the DPW, has single-handedly volunteered to care for Evans Field as a volunteer, spending thousands of dollars of his own money for the past 15 years. So thank you to Jeff. And just so people know, we've obviously followed all of the CPC regulations and requirements in doing the research and getting multiple quotes. And the way the breakdown would work is all of the fencing and backstops, and I basically took the average quotes, would be about $91,000. The fencing and fence guards around the field and dugouts, $24,700. New sod in the infield and outfield is approximately $26,000, and restored wooden bleachers in the grandstands. Those bleachers we think are about 60 years old. We would replace them with composite wood to stick with the historical nature of Evans Field, and the average quote for that was about $98,000. So that's how we got to $239,000. Thanks.
All right, Toby.
Could you hear me all right?
Now, one question, we have a lot of people, you don't get a second, sorry.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. One of the standards for community preservation projects is, have you gone out and tried to raise money from other sources? So I guess I would ask that question. There are numbers of local foundations that could have been turned to. Was that done? I'm curious. Also, it's only useful if we can get at it. And some years ago, the Board of Selectmen appealed to the MBTA for an easement to get from the train station property onto Evans Field. Whatever became of that? Did we ever get the easement?
I think Mr. Murphy wanted to speak?
Yeah, okay. No,
Okay.
Ruth.
Now batting for Rockport, Paul Murphy.
Second baseman. Well, I appreciate Toby's comments, but this is town-owned property, and I'm not sure that we need to fundraise for this. If you've been to Evans Field, and I've been there a lot in recent years, someone's like the DPW barn, quite frankly, someone's going to get hurt up there. The bleachers are in terrible shape. Someone's going to fall, someone's going to get hurt. So I think the committee or the people that put this together have done a great job. This is a real jewel of Rockport. I believe it was built with WPA money. So I think I would like to urge everyone to get behind this project. Thank you.
All right, anybody who has not spoken that wants to speak? All right, sir.
Daniel O'Donnell, 52 Main Street. I do appreciate what has been stated since I last spoke, but I just want to say that I wish it was a little bit better sales job, because I had no idea what was involved in that $239,000, and I still only have just a small smidgen of idea about what's going on. So, thanks.
Okay, you have heard the motion. If you are in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. The motion passes 81 to 19. 184 to 42. Film at 11. Third motion.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $31,800 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation Historic Preservation Reserve account to be expended under the oversight of the Department of Public Works, working with the Community Preservation Committee and the Rockport Historical Commission for the restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of the historic freight crane at the railroad station, 17 Railroad Ave, Rockport, and to enhance the safety, historic integrity, and appearance of the freight crane and its immediate surroundings. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this project.
Moved and seconded. Ruth?
Hello? Okay, now. A little bit about the freight crane at the railroad station. I always thought it was just a crane. I didn't really understand it until you learn about it through the applicant. The Rockport Gloucester branch of the railroad was built in 1861 as a single-track spur line linking to Beverly. The railroad was started as the Eastern Railroad, then the Boston and Maine, and finally today run by the MBTA. This crane was erected in 1871, 10 years after the railroad line was started, and used by the Rockport Granite Company for moving local granite from our quarrying industry, then used to transport steel from the Cape to the Cape Ann Tool. It was the Boston and Maine freight crane in 1885. This was used to fill rail cars full of granite and cobblestones to New York City for the boom of building granite buildings. It was used by Cape Ann Tool from 1912 to 1984 for steel deliveries. A historical architectural assessment was done in July 21st of 21. This historical information was in a report done by PAL of Rhode Island, and I urge anyone to go look at that. We have copies in the library and town hall. They do preservation. They did a preservation planning study for the Historic Commission and in a grant by the Essex Partnership Grant, and with the help of the applicant for this project, Julie McMahon and Eric Hutchinson. They feel it is a unique piece of stone and quarrying industry and railroad history for Rockport and Massachusetts. It needs protective measures to prevent further deterioration due to environmental exposure. This piece of Rockport history has been determined to be eligible on the listing of National Register of Historic Places, and one of the only few surviving examples of industrial freight cranes in New England. Originally operated by hand cranks or steam and later electrified when the B&M took it over. In 1885, this was a freight and passenger line until a bridge in Beverly was destroyed by fire in 1984. So Rockport was doing freight until 1984, and then when the bridge was rebuilt, it only served passengers to Rockport. So that's sort of the history of the railroad station and the importance of this crane in our history and preserving it for the town of Rockport, for the quarrying industry, for the Cape Ann tool usage, and for the railroad usage. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say to the gentleman before, all of our CPC meetings are open to the public. They're on the town website, and we post our minutes. And all of the applicants who apply, we have a beginning meeting telling people how to apply, what are topics that they can look at, housing, open space and recreation, that type of thing. And that once we get the applications and we get them stamped at Town Hall, they are available at Town Hall, and we usually put a set in the library so people can read all the applications before it comes here. Thank you.
Okay, you've heard the motion. I see that Mr. Seppala wants to speak.
Yes, Z. Seppala, 92 Granite Street. I'm old enough to remember that crane in operation with the electric motors taking the steel bars out of the gondola cars. So I sort of am familiar with how it operated, to electric motors. The only part of that crane that looks to me like it's really in bad shape is the boom, that big long bar going up at 45-degree angles. So what I'm curious about is what, if anything, has the committee done insofar as saying what does need to be restored on it, and what's the scope of the work to be done. It seems theoretically possible to me that you could get it running again if you ever wanted to have a Rockport crane demonstration day.
Ruth?
It's not going to be operational. It's just going to be enhanced so it won't deteriorate anymore, and they're going to replace some of the pieces that are missing. They feel they can get those or make them and make it like it used to look.
Is the boom...
No follow-up question. We have a lot of people, so we'll have to hear from the gentleman behind you.
Maybe Eric Hutchinson would want to comment on that.
Well, let's hear from the gentleman and then Eric.
Jay Wallahan, 24.
Right, get right up to that.
Jay
microphone.
Wallahan, 24 Doctors Run.
Right up to it.
My question is similar. What are we going to get for our $31,800, and is it going to be enough to let the crane be maintained for a long period of time, or is there going to be additional expenses involved? And I hate to say it because I'm a supporter of historic preservation, but has the cost of removing it been considered as an alternative?
Eric Hutchins, 45 Pools Lane. I can probably answer the last two questions that cropped up. So there are three components to the request as far as what the money is being spent on. One is National Register documentation. Actually, is to get it formally documented. Right now, it's known to be eligible. It clearly can get on the register, but this would be to get it another registered site in Rockport. And that's approximately $6,500 through that whole process, working through the state government to get it on the register. I mean, we have many registered projects, a number of them in Rockport, but this would add to that list. What? Raise the mic. Okay, there we go. I'll repeat that if you want. And then approximately $5,000 for historic interpretive signage to put proper signage up at the site, because one of the things that we've recognized well over 15 years of talking about the crane, as many of you have, is a lot of people, I even heard someone talking behind me, said, what crane? Where is that crane? Is to actually get some information up there to put it in the context of this very old and historic train station. We still have a couple of structures left there that actually retain the historic integrity, and to actually have interpretive signage there, since it's a gateway to Rockport, a gateway to Evans Field, and there's an awful lot of people that go through there. So to put it in the historical context. And then the freight crane stabilization, approximately $15,000. These were estimates that we got working with Public Archaeology Laboratory. You know, they are low numbers. And the stabilization is to take care of some of the parts that are literally just falling off, making it safe. I've heard people talk about the safety of the site. The hope would be to build a little, right now there's, for those of you who've seen it recently, a couple of Jersey barriers lined around the edges. The hope would be to put a nicer edge around it, clean up some of the unsafe parts, and stabilize some of the metal to retain future deterioration. One thing I can tell you is that there are parts of this structure, parts of it, that 1,000 years from now will still be there. The integrity of some of the steel is 8 to practically 10 inches thick. But there are other parts that are relatively thin and need stabilization.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. Years ago, before the Wuhan flu, when the Board of Selectmen were writing letters to the MBTA about their sundry grievances, including the easement I inquired about. They also wanted help with the crane. And back came a letter from the MBTA, which the Board of Selectmen sneered at, offering some paltry sum of money to slap some paint on it and put a chain link fence around it. That was not a generous or acceptable offer. Incidentally, I didn't get answers to my questions about the previous question, one of which related to, did you ask for money from other possible sources? Here they did. That's commendable. No answer on the earlier one. They might also have thought to ask for money from the MBTA. Was that done?
Eric, go ahead.
Direct requests to the MBTA for money at this point has not been done, and that will be hopefully be part of the long-term process of any long-term stabilization. One of the real key components of this is getting it on the National Historic Register. Getting it on the National Historic Register will make it in every state and federal eyes for funding to actually see to it that it stays there in the long term.
All right, you've heard the motion. If you are in favor of it, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. The motion carries 68 to 32%, 156 to 72. We move on to the fourth part of this.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $46,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation Historic Preservation Reserve account as a grant to the Sandy Bay Historical Society, Incorporated, a nonprofit corporation duly organized under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to be expended under the oversight of the Board of Selectmen, working with the Community Preservation Committee, for the restoration, rehabilitation, and historic preservation of the historic blacksmith shop at the Old Castle at 2 to 4 Castle Lane, Rockport, and as may be necessary to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept a preservation restriction on said building in connection therewith. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this article.
Moved and seconded. Ruth?
Thank you. A little bit about the Old Castle shed, which was a blacksmith shop. This structure sits at the Old Castle property at Castle Lane in Pigeon Cove. The plan is to construct a new 12-foot by 16-foot blacksmith shop shed that replicates the existing shed, and to refurbish the bellows, fire pit, and to display the typical blacksmith shop of an earlier era. After discussion with a restoration contractor, the building committee of the Sandy Bay Historical concluded that removing the structure and rebuilding in kind was the only feasible option. After exposing the sills and floor joists and corner posts, the structure was found to be beyond repair. The existing shed is falling down and in disrepair, but all the interior contents will be used in the new structure. They plan to refurbish the bellows that is there. This was a blacksmith shop that was used in the horse and buggy days and tools used in the 18 to 1900s. When rebuilt using rough stone framing and board and batten sidewalls to match the existing building. The only change will be to replace asphalt shingles with red cedar roofing shingles to match the old castle. This will be part of the town's history and will be open as part of the Old Castle tour that many people take. The castle is on the National Register of Historic Places as of 1978. Sandy Bay Historical's mission is to collect, preserve, display, and share our local history with the Cape Ann community. Sandy Bay Historical's Building Committee will oversee the work and all our volunteers on this project. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? All right, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. Motion carries 76% to 24%, or 172 to 53%. We now move on to the 5th article here.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $100,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation Community Housing Reserve, and that $40,000 from the Community Preservation Undesignated Account as a grant to Harbor Light Community Partners, a nonprofit corporation duly organized under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to be expended under the oversight of the Board of Selectmen, working with the Community Preservation Committee for the creation, construction, and establishment of affordable community housing at 5 Granite Street, Rockport. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this project.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Ruth?
Thank you. First, I'd like to read a message from Kristen Carlson. She's the Director of Real Estate Development for Harbor Light, who's working on the Harbor Light 5 Granite Street project. She couldn't come here tonight because she's home ill with COVID. Harbor Light Community Partners is very grateful for the town of Rockport's ongoing support of our Granite Street crossing project. We especially want to thank the CPC and town meeting for considering this year's application. With the same escalating construction costs and rising interest rates we are all facing, our whole team has worked very hard to balance the project budget. The additional projected funding of $140,000 from close to close our funding gap and begin construction. Construction began at the end of June this year and is expected to last 12 months. In the summer of 2023, we look forward to welcoming 17 seniors and 6 families to affordable rental homes on Granite Street. In addition to the 23 new affordable homes, with a preference from Rockport residents as allowed by the fair housing rules, Granite Street Crossing will contribute to Rockport's multiple other ways: ongoing property taxes, enhanced landscaping, improved drainage, and a payment of town fees and permits. Thank you for considering the CPC request, which allows for us to leverage needed state funding and advance Granite Street Crossing to completion. We look forward to welcoming you as a ribbon-cutting season nears next summer. Thank you very much. And I have just a few facts about the project to tell you about. This project is coming back before us with cost increases secondary to the pandemic and supply chain and other factors. They have also gone back to the state and other agencies to help cover their rising costs. This is on the grounds of the old Silver Brothers greenhouse at 5 Granite Street. It will be a community housing run by Harbor Light Community Partners that is a nonprofit. They also own and manage Rockport High School apartments and Pigeon Cove Lodges, both that have extensive waiting lists. This complex will have 17 studio units for individuals 62 years plus, and using the independent living model with integrated supportive services as needed. This will serve as the hub for services for the Rockport High School apartments and Pigeon Cove Lodges, so they will have someone medical there at times and nutrition things, and the person they will go to all three of the housing complexes that they serve. This complex will also have units in 2 smaller townhouse buildings in the back, with 6 units for families. One building will have 2 2-bedroom units, and the other building will have 4 3-bedroom units. This project will increase our numbers of affordable units from 135 right now to 158, a 17% increase, getting us up to 4.6%. This property was purchased by Harbor Light's 7/29/16 and finally broke ground in June of this year. We have also given Harbor Light money from CPC, $20,000 in 2017, $250,018, and $219, and it's finally getting off the ground. So it's wonderful that they've broken ground, and hopefully we can get this completed in a timely manner. Thank you.
And before we hear from anybody, I look in the back and I see Senator Bruce Tarr, who has joined us this evening. A better advocate for our community we could not find, and I would like to publicly thank you, Senator Tarr, for all you do for us. All right, any discussion on this one? Toby.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I'm very much in favor of affordable housing and actually contribute annually to Harbor Light. What I contribute would hardly matter, not being rich. But reservations about what they've done.
They're not taking reservations yet.
No, but they got a comprehensive permit from the Board of Appeals, which is what you get for a 40B project. And that included extensive stipulations about what was to be done for landscaping to ameliorate the concerns of the neighbors, reasonable enough. And I see recently they've murdered the handsome holly tree out by the entrance to the property. I think that was a wretched and a poor thing to do, and I feel that they ought to, as they get going, replace it. Ruth said that there's preference given to Rockport residents, and that's, of course, what we would all hope. The state and its rules govern that, and you can ask for a certain percent, but it's up to them to say yes or no. What percent of the units are reserved for Rockport residents? And I'm also aware that they came before the DPW commissioners asking to be spared the fees that are charged for water and sewer hookups. Perhaps it was, I missed that meeting, perhaps it was only sewer hookups. Maybe the DPW could tell us. And I feel that such special considerations for any group are inappropriate. Would the DPW please tell us? I'd vote for it, but I have doubts, reservations.
I will say that we don't know the percentage for Rockport residents, but they are going to get some type of a preference, but we don't know the amount.
Jim Gardner.
Jim Gardner.
Get right up to that microphone.
Jim Gardner, Chairman of the DPW Commissioners. Yes, Harbor Light came to us and asked for either to be the sewer connection fee to be eliminated or to be reduced. However, we have decided that we have such an extensive sewer problem in town that we really can't afford to do that. So we are working with them. We have asked if they could pay over time, but not take a reduction of the fee, and we are right now negotiating that with them.
Okay, you have heard the motion. All those in, oh, Jane.
Hi, Jane O'Malley.
Get right up to that mic.
Jane O'Malley, 63 Pigeon Hill Street. This is the first I heard there was going to be any preference for Rockport residents, and I think if we're going to give more money, I would like to hear exactly the percentage that will go. We should know. It's our money, and it's our community, and we have people here who can't find places to live, teachers, families, elderly who can't stay in their own community because of Airbnb and other pressures on this community. So I just think that's an important number.
I think that's something that will be determined from the Board of Selectmen and the state and Harbor Light. Selectmen?
Denise?
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to this project, but I know that the way the funding works is that if a project such as this accepts public funding, in this case CPC funding, they may allocate only up to 70% of the units to the community's residents. So it's possible that they may allocate up to 70% of the units to Rockport residents.
Yes.
At one of the, Terry Rizzolo for Summit, at one of the initial meetings, when Harbor Lights did this presentation, the public question was with regard to if the town invested the monies, what preference, if any, was going to be given. We were assured that we would be given some, and we were told at that meeting that the selectmen had to request it. So my question is, did the selectmen request it? And if so, where is that documented? Next, I agree with the woman who just spoke that if we are continually being asked for increasing sums of money, and it's only, I mean, you know, all of this issue, supply chain, cost of materials, that's only going to continue. And how are we ever going to be able to say no? We're always going to be kind of backed into this situation of, well, we've already risked, put in almost $500,000, how much more?
Mr. Murphy, I know the documents at Mar-a-Lago. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Murphy, 21 Pleasant Street in Rockport, also on the Board of Selectmen. I fully support affordable housing in Rockport, but there's something that we need to do something about attracting young people, school-age kids for our school system here. So we need to continue to have this conversation. It's not tonight, of course, but I just want to urge town meeting to keep that in the back of our minds, that we need to really encourage being able, affordable housing for young people. Our school system is now, you know, 735 kids K through 12. So, well, I don't know if we need to go. I'd like to see more young people move here.
Please.
But that's a conversation down the road. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Creamer, and I live at 69 South Street. I'm voting for this tonight. I'm totally supportive of affordable housing in Rockport. I asked, one of my questions is has Harbor Lights received all the money that it has had requested in the past? Yes, good. And I asked on behalf of folks that I know in Rockport that have had to move out because they can't afford it, young families, that more emphasis be placed in the CPC committee on affordable housing. I know over the years that it's been pretty much equally, the money has been equally spent between preservation, recreation, et cetera, and housing, around $3 million each, based on the statement that was posted on the Rockport website. I'd like to see that increase dramatically. There's no requirement, I know there's a requirement that 10% of the funds for each category would be spent in that category, but that leaves 70% to be spent in an area that, you know, that the committee can choose. And I respectfully ask that more emphasis be placed on creating more affordable housing opportunities for young people and families in this town. My own grandson lives in a unit that he can barely afford, paying admittedly only $1,200 a month, but that's the situation he has with his girlfriend and his son. And I don't see any relief for him here on Cape Ann, and I'm hoping that he can continue to live here, you know, at a reasonable rate. And prices are going crazy all over the country. We know that, particularly on Cape Ann. But I just want to bring to your attention and to have consideration for people that
do not have the money, that do not have the ability to purchase a home or to rent a property at a reasonable amount. And that's why I'll be voting for this and for future.
Okay, Denise, you first, and then that gentleman. If you raise your hand and then I see you kind of walk over to the microphone, it'll save us a little bit of time. We'll appreciate that.
Denise Donnelly, 72 Pigeon Hill Street. I'm also on the Board of Selectmen. I want to just make a couple of points here. I'm not sure if it's clear to everyone that money that the CPC allocates, if you vote against something, that money does not go back into the general budget. That money is designated for the CPC to allocate as it sees fit based on proposals submitted to it to the 4 categories that we talked about, one of which is affordable housing. The second point I want to make is that just because we support this affordable housing project doesn't mean that we won't want to support other affordable housing projects, as Mr. Creamer pointed out. I think we have to do our part as a community to take every opportunity to support any affordable housing project that is available in our town. So if that means that 70% of the projects go to local residents, that's more than we have now. I know that they have not yet begun to take applications or just beginning to take applications for the lottery for this project. Given the point that I think it was that Terry made, I can speak on behalf of myself on the Board of Selectmen. Certainly we will let Harbor Light know that we would like there to be a preference for Rockport residents. Thank you.
Randall Stevens, 103 Marmion Way. I've heard over the years...
Get it right up into that microphone.
I've heard over the years about having families and children come into the community. That's a bit of a fallacy. So here's the data. In order to have replacement of a population for women of 15 to 44 years of age, they have to produce 210 children. The U.S. population, that is at 176. The Massachusetts population is at 58, and Rockport is at 46. The entire Essex County and Massachusetts have a decline in children coming to schools. So affordable housing is not going to be a way of populating the school system. Thank you.
Okay, when you speak, make sure you speak right into that microphone and really project your voice.
Testing. Lynn Chambers, 11 Eden Road. I've been attending these meetings for over 45 years, and I have to say with great sorrow that I feel grief for the direction of our town. We have cavalierly, without much worry or discussion, voted $250,000 for a ball field, 32 for a crane, 46 for a blacksmith shop, all with the guarantee that we're going to rehab these so that they will last for perpetuity. Nonsense. We have an obligation to our citizens first and foremost.
Eleanor Goldman, 13 Pleasant Street, I'd like to address the comment 2 before me, because I am in the demographic that was spoken about. I am a woman in that age range, and I would like to afford housing here. So, you know what? I'm going to vote for this because I'm not a statistic, I'm a human, and I'd like to afford housing here. So you can throw out a bunch of numbers. If you want me to afford housing here, you want me to have children who attend the schools, please vote for this. Thank you.
All right, you've heard the motion. If you are in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B. Starting now. The motion carries 84% to 16%, or 196 to 38. We move on to the 6th submotion here.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $150,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation undesignated account and be expended under the direction of the Director of Public Works and DPW Commissioners, working with the Community Preservation Committee for the restoration, rehabilitation, and historic preservation of the exterior of the historic Pigeon Cove Fire Station at 118 Granite Street, Rockport. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this motion.
Moved and seconded. Ruth?
Just a little bit about the Pigeon Cove Fire Station. This is another case of coming for additional funding for rehab of the Cove Fire Station. It was built in 1844 with a vote from this town meeting to appropriate $600 for, quote, an engine house in the Cove. In 2016, CPC and this town meeting appropriated $300,000 to help look at the envelope of the building and try to restore the outside of it and some internal areas. It was put out to bid with no results. Over the years, we have tried a variety of approaches to raise interest, and none were found until 2021. Now, the top 3 received have been forwarded to the Firehouse Design Selection Committee. This project has increased significantly due to the increase of copper to be used in flashing and gutters, up 50% since its initial estimate, and other costs have risen. This is one of the oldest operating wooden frame fire stations in Massachusetts, used every day to ensure public safety, staffed by our dedicated fire volunteers. The building needs replaced roof shingles, underlying roof sheathing, gutters, downspouts, and flashing. It needs removal of the plastic siding and replaced damaged wood, painting, and hopefully to be finished spring of 2023. Thank you.
Any discussion? Oh, Toby.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I'm sure we're all going to vote for this. We all are grateful to the fire department. If we're not grateful, we should be grateful. It could hardly be a less appropriate building for the intended use. They back the engines into it with inches to spare. They have great skill and take pride in it. They make do with something that people shouldn't have to make do with. The building is way too close to the street. It's on a blind corner. It sits on a lot that's a postage stamp. You can't build a bigger building. In truth, I mean, it's not a helpful comment at this juncture. We should sell the building and find a site for a proper Pigeon Cove Fire Station. If we sold this building and also sold the old Firehouse Trust downtown, we probably would have enough money to buy a proper site for a proper Pigeon Cove Fire Station. Where then would we get the money to actually build one? Well, the selectmen, not the town meeting, are being given millions of dollars to celebrate the Wuhan flu, the ARPA funds in 2 lump sums. So if that money could be used, we might actually be able to afford to build a proper Pigeon Cove Fire Station in a proper site. Meanwhile, you can put the money into this if you want. Certainly it's not wasted. The building is worth preserving for some purpose, if not for this one. I'm voting against it. And I do hope they come when my house is burning.
Herm. Your address again, Toby?
Herm Lilliam, one of the other members of the board. Can you or can you not hear me?
Get right on that
Can you
microphone.
hear me? Ah. Okay, another selectman. Anyway, I think there's a caveat here that needs to be mentioned, and that's that you can't buy another piece of property and construct another fire station for Pigeon Cove and use CPC money. It's for historic purposes, not for new construction.
Any other comments from anyone who hasn't spoken tonight? All right. You've heard the motion. If you are in favor, press 1. And if you are opposed, press 2. Starting now. Motion passes 78% to 22%. 185-52. We move on to the 7th.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $100,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation undesignated account and be expended under the direction of the Thatcher and Straitsmith Islands Town Committee, working with the Community Preservation Committee for the restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of the historic South Tower on Thatcher Island. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this article.
Okay, Ruth.
The historic South Tower on Thatcher Island. This project is to restore and preserve the lantern and gallery deck of the South Tower on Thatcher's. Thatcher's is a 52-acre island off Rockport. The towers were built in, again, 1861. The island gets 3,000 plus visitors per year. When climbing the South Tower, the gallery deck rises 160 feet above the ocean for panoramic views of the North Shore, Cape Ann, and Boston. The ICC Commonwealth is the lighthouse contractor that the town has used. A recent inspection noted rust jacking, resulting in iron expanding in the granite, causing cracking in the large granite blocks to make it unsafe. They state that it is in dangerous condition in the gallery deck and lantern deck on both the North and South Towers. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife owners of the North Tower are owners of the North Tower, and they raised the funds necessary to work on the repairs, hopefully for 2023. Thatcher's Association is hoping to have both towers done at the same time for a cost saving. Thatcher's was deeded to the town in 2001. The Thatcher Island Association has 800 members and 75 volunteers that work tirelessly on repairing and preserving the beautiful island and its structures. CPC and townspeople over the years have given $725,600 to preserving both structures and other buildings on Straitsmith, and the group has raised over $3.2 million with the help of numerous applications from the Manton Foundation, Maritime of Salem, and Heritage Community Trust, and the U.S. Lighthouse Survey, to name a few. This is a very worthwhile project. Born and bred here, I hadn't been out to Thatcher's till a couple of years ago, and it is so delightful. Anyone should go out there for that and look at it. For a short trip out there, it is absolutely breathtaking. And you don't have to have a boat, you don't have to have a kayak, you just make a reservation and go down to Wharf and go out in the summer. It's beautiful. Thank you.
All right, any questions, comments? All right, you have heard the motion. If you are in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. 7% opposed. (219) in favor and 17 opposed. That motion carries. We go on to the eighth and final CPC motion.
Mr. Moderator, CPC Vice Chair Ruth George moves that $334,000 be appropriated and transferred from the Community Preservation undesignated account as a grant to the Rockport Baptist Church, a nonprofit corporation duly organized under the laws of Massachusetts, to be expended under the direction of the Board of Selectmen working with the Community Preservation Committee for the restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of the steeple and bell in the historic Rockport Baptist Church at 4 High Street, Rockport, and as may be necessary to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept a preservation restriction on said building in connection therewith. Board of Selectmen and Community Preservation Committee support this motion.
Moved and seconded. Ruth?
The church was built in 1823. Being a CPC project and being a church, this project meets the test of the Supreme Judicial Court. No religious items are in this project. It is all historic preservation in nature. This is for the repair of the church steeple and have the bell reinstalled. The bell rang in the 19th century till about the late 1970s. The church has completed an engineering study for $10,000 on their own. Their church has raised $30,000 towards this project. The building is a town landmark and part of the historic landscape of Rockport. They have spoken and gotten estimates from the steeplejack company used by the other churches in town that we have funded previously for steeple repairs, they have found extensive rotted corner posts, fungal growth with wall studs rotted away, and signs of powder post beetles. The church was given by CPC and townspeople $120,000 for fire suppression installation and protection previously from CPC. Thank you very much.
Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I strongly oppose this, Terry Rizzolo for Summit. I strongly oppose this allocation for several reasons. The first is, though Ruth said this is not to be used, no religious artifacts or whatever, the final purpose of this is a place of worship. This particular church is an evangelical biblical Bible church. The Bible is the source of all of their beliefs, and they hold that to be the one and only truths. The church itself, the Baptist Church, discriminates against LGBTQ community. As far as they are concerned, the only true marriage is that of between a man and a woman. And the minister, anyone who is active in their ministry, may not be a practicing homosexual. So you can dress this up, and I understand certainly that the state Supreme Court has said that this kind of funding is allowed, but given the nature of this particular church, I strongly object to it and will vote no. There are only, as I did some research on the website in terms of the membership, as of their last numbers, there are only 72 members in this congregation. Their total donations and collections up to this year were $170,000. Previous years, it was far less than that. And in total, in terms of their expenses, they have spent almost everything that they have taken in. Again, it is not a self-supporting or barely self-supporting institution. And as a consequence, I strongly am against using public funding for this.
Alan, and then Peter, and then anyone else? Getcha?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alan Macmillan, 18 Story Street. This issue has come up many times over the years for various churches in town. What is the thing you see in every picture of a quaint old New England town? The church spire on the white wooden church. This church has served the community for over 150 years. Many people who have gone to this church have gone on to make great careers, have helped to support this town. It is a historic structure. We have spent money on other churches here in town, the Unitarian Church for repair of the steeple and windows, the old Sloop Church, which was Town Hall in 1805, by the way. This is another one of the churches that's an important part of the history of our community and supports people who care about other people, that are not selfish people. Whatever your opinion is, it's a historic structure. It deserves the support of the community, and I am voting for this. Thank you.
Peter.
Peter Goodwin, 6 North Road.
Nice, right into that microphone, nice and loud, like you're projecting your voice.
Peter Goodwin, 6 North Road, Rockport. I am not a member of any church in town. I'll put that the way. I think any mention of creed or anything else like that is out of place and beneath this town meeting. Now, the community preservation people spent a fair amount of money helping to rehabilitate the Congregational Church up the hill. There's no good reason why they shouldn't help the Baptist Church. Both of them are equally obvious in town. Both of them are landmarks. I agree. Let's vote for it.
Yes, ma'am. Project your voice.
I shall. Good evening, everyone. Linda Meditz, PhD, 98 Main Street. I'd just like to support the comments of those who have indicated that the theology, beliefs, practices of a given congregation are not the subject of indictment or judgment of this town meeting. Rather, the proposal has to do with a structure, with a long history, in need. Others have been supported whose theology may be objectionable to others of us of this town meeting. That is not the purpose of this body, and so I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Oh, Ruth, one more person. Oh. Go ahead.
Good evening, Sal DiStefano, 43 High Street. I live up the street from this building. It is definitely in need of work. It is a historical structure. It is also a place where they hold a lot of youth services that are open to everyone. Very good people involved in it, and therefore I will be voting yes for this proposal. Thank you.
I just want to say that so far in CPC since we started, we've spent $870,940.65 on church renovations in this town. And it's all under historic preservation. It's been the Congregational Church, the Unitarian, the UU Church steeple, the Baptist Church for another thing. Pigeon Cove Chapel came to us for funds. We've tried to do every church that needed help in a way to support the historic preservation of these beautiful structures. You stand anywhere downtown and look, and you see these beautiful spires. That's what we're looking at, and that's what we want to try to protect. Thank you.
All right, you have heard the motion. If you are in favor, press 1 or A. If you are opposed, press 2 or B. Starting now. The motion carries 71% to 29%, or 165 to 68. And I believe that's it. Phil?
Bring some more projects to us next year. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank all of you. This is a lot of work. The chair will entertain a motion under Article G for golf.
Mr. Moderator, lead petitioner John Penaloza moves that the town approve Article G as printed in the September 12, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen does not support this article.
Moved and seconded. John? This is non-binding, by the way. We have a big agenda for tonight, so we'll just take that into consideration.
I want to make sure everybody can hear me clearly. Is that the case? By now, nearly everyone here has heard about the Massachusetts statute known as the residential tax exemption. This policy allows Massachusetts towns to give a property tax break to homeowners who occupy their properties by reducing their taxable assessed value by up to 35% of their town's average assessed residential value. This law has been implemented by 16 towns and cities in Massachusetts whose residents comprise no less than 18.6% of Massachusetts' population. Most of these RTE communities fall into two camps: Boston and its surrounding municipalities, where housing is scarce and property speculation is rampant, and highly desirable vacation communities, where housing speculation is often the result of asset collection by wealthy second homeowners, and especially by short-term rental models like the use of Airbnb. Rockport falls squarely into the latter camp, seeing double-digit increases in property values year after year as of late, and feeling the pressure of these sky-high valuations and tax burdens on longtime residents, both homeowners and renters. I see examples of this constantly on social media, and I'm sure you have too. How many times have you read a desperate post by a longtime resident to the effect that their rent is going up or that the building they live in is being sold and they have to get out, only to find there's no housing available in Rockport that's within their means? Or that due to constant increases in value, longtime homeowners who are house rich but cash poor, quote unquote, are being forced into the wrenching position of deciding to sell their home in a town they can no longer afford to live in. Many local governments have always assumed they are powerless to counteract the instability and displacement caused by the real estate market with such fast and exorbitant price hikes. But the adoption of a residential tax exemption policy can provide profound economic effects in the long run and fundamentally shift the dynamics of housing scarcity that we are facing. Beyond the obvious tax break for individual local homeowners, there are multiple advantages to the adoption of an RTE for the Rockport community as a whole. Combination of an RTE with protective policies for renters, such as Provincetown's affordable housing exemption, as well as Rockport's new permissions with regard to accessory dwelling units, have the potential to really incentivize creation of new affordable units, both for sale and rent, to help address Rockport's acute housing supply crisis. Among other effects, these measures will incentivize the conversion of large multifamily properties, which don't benefit much from a residential exemption, into multiple smaller condo units that do. This has the benefit of creating additional units from our existing housing stock, alleviating additional demands on public services. And where new construction would already be taking place, it will be guided and sized by the economics of the new tax incentives available to owners of more moderately valued properties. Also, a residential exemption will serve as a giant glowing neon sign warning of higher costs to speculation in Rockport for the entire investor class of individuals and corporations that now swoop in and snap up Rockport homes in cash. This practice currently deprives normal buyers of even the chance to come up with mortgage financing for a for-sale home they would actually live in. Communities whose housing is protected by a residential exemption increasingly fall off the short list of targets of these vulture capitalists when they are deciding where to strike next. Subtracting a portion of their demand on our housing supply can greatly help keep price increases in check. Finally, we will literally take the first steps ever attempted to help slow or reverse the depopulation of our town and the loss of our local resident community. It's an absolute tragedy that Rockporters who have lived here for generations are seeing their kids and grandkids unable to stay in town and carry on their family legacy. Or that seniors living in homes they worked hard for are being suddenly valued far above their means and are essentially facing eviction from their town via their tax bill. Or that the fundamental need for Rockport's schools is even in question because of the continued decline in our population of school-aged kids. Or that Rockport's businesses are having to face terrible decisions about continuing to exist in the face of ridiculous rent costs and the lack of local, often younger workers to help in their stores. Or the sad reality of parts of town that are virtually ghost towns at any time but the high summer season, where you no longer have the security of knowing or seeing your neighbors on a daily basis, and creating the social fabric that is created from threads made of streets teeming with life. Or the attitudes that allow the money of these uncaring outside investors to dictate our town's policy decisions. The collusion allowing them to build unsanctioned helicopter pads and then putting the town's resources in precarious jeopardy against the legal costs of not letting them get their way, while we get to bear witness to the destruction of public treasures such as the Atlantic Path. It may seem like a breathtaking reach to link all of these impacts and situations to a seemingly mundane adjustment in property tax policy. But as an economist, I know that this is where big change is actually ignited. Housing is the lifeblood of every town. Every aspect of a community that matters stems from its ability to provide a person or a family a place to live, and with some expectation that this provision will continue into the future. The ties that bind us as business owners and customers, as classmates, teammates, members of local groups and volunteer efforts, firefighters, local artists and musicians, members of our church congregations, neighbors, and even friends, all originate with where we live, where we call home. It is that essential human need that we aim to begin to protect for Rockport tonight. If every Rockporter votes in their own financial self-interest on this issue, it should pass by a healthy majority. And this is the rare situation in which what's good for most of you will fundamentally be a saving grace for our town as well. Thank you.
Okay, for the Board of Selectmen, Sarah Wilkinson.
Thank you. Good evening. The Board of Selectmen have voted not to support this petition article. At a recent Selectmen's meeting, we were given a presentation on the exemption by the town's principal assessor, Liz Dukes. Liz is here this evening and can answer questions. At this time, the Selectmen are not in favor of this type of exemption. The residential exemption was designed to shift the tax burden from modestly priced homes to higher priced and vacation homes. The amount of tax that needs to be paid by the town does not change. This would just shift who pays more of it. Communities that have enacted this exemption successfully are often large cities or towns with many non-owner occupied buildings, such as large apartment buildings, or resort communities with a majority of seasonal residents, like Provincetown. Rockport is not one of these communities. Our assessor estimates that 75% of our properties are year-round residences. This is the opposite of the type of community this exemption is successful in. Rockport is a small town made up of residents of all walks of life. We have residents who have lived here for decades and perhaps inherited their homes. We have new year-round residents, some of whom moved here during COVID. We have summer residents who have come here for generations, and some who have just found us recently. Some people rent, some people own. We are all lucky to be here. The key point is that we all make Rockport what it is. Us year-rounders with little kids keep the school going, and our summer residents pay taxes and buy dump stickers and support our businesses so they can stay open through the long winters. Big picture, it takes all of us to keep Cracker Jacks and Brothers Brew open all year. This exemption will create a divide in town purely based on the value of your property. We are not interested in doing that. The Board of Selectmen believe in treating all property owners equally. Thank you.
Okay, there are a lot of people lined up here, so let's have at it. State your point of order. Let's hear from town council, shall we?
Sorry, you have a switch on that mic. You have a switch on the front. There you go. How's that? There you go. Good evening. The question from Mr. Arsenian was, can you explain why this is non-binding, even though it is not a resolution? The reason why this article is non-binding is under the very law that applies this exemption. The decision is not for the legislative body town meeting, but is strictly given to the Board of Selectmen to decide whether or not to accept or apply this exemption and how much. So the town meeting does not have the authority on this issue. It is not considered by Mass General laws to be a legislative issue, yet rather it is considered to be an issue for the Chief Executive Officer, the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Okay, let's start.
Lisa Mooney, 104 Long Beach.
Knight, get right up to that microphone. And I actually think
Lisa
this microphone
Mooney,
here,
104
wait,
Long
please.
Beach.
I think this microphone is better. So if you're lining up, line up here. No? All right. Go ahead. I haven't heard anybody.
I need some clarification, first of all, on this article. To qualify for residential exemption, a property must be on January 1st, the owner occupied. Is that correct?
We will hear from the principal assessor.
Hi,
Liz
good evening.
Dukes.
Elizabeth Dukes, Assessor, Town of Rockport. That is correct. The qualification is January 1st, owner occupied.
So
And we're not going to have a conversation. We have to move on to the next person. But please state your
question regarding
please
that.
state your name and your address, and we have to go on to the next person.
Can I not speak?
No.
Excuse me?
Please step aside. We have a lot of people lined up. If we still have time, we'll hear from you later.
I cannot believe how rude you are.
Please step aside. We have to hear from the next person. Thank you.
Laurie McKenna, 31 High Street. I admit this is the first I've heard of it, but as the presentation was going on, I was thinking, well, yeah, so I understand that people like myself who own homes and live in them might get a smaller tax bill, but that my savings and other people in my situation have to be paid by somebody else so we can run the town. And it will not only fall on the people who own property and, rent it out as Airbnbs, but what about all the people in Rockport who live here who rent? So, maybe there are people, I know there are a lot of people who rent who've been here for a very long time. I would imagine the owners of their properties, the landlords, would therefore have to pay a higher tax to the town, and rents would go up. And I think this is something we want to avoid. We want people to live in Rockport, people who can afford to live here in homes they own, and people who can afford to live here renting. I don't think we should end up in a situation where renters can't afford to live here.
Elizabeth Brooks.
Get right up to that microphone and really project.
Yep, thank you. Elizabeth Brooks, 44 Long Beach, number 3. I'm born and raised here, and I have a problem with this bill. John has admitted that the renter's break exemption would not apply for most people. It doesn't even apply for the affordable housing that's being built on Granite Street, because he says the rent has to be $1,458. For the 2-bedroom apartments that are being built on Granite Street, the rent will be $18-something. So they wouldn't even get the exception. Then you also have the Long Beach people, which this woman was trying to say, that can't occupy their property on January 1st. But so they're going to get taxed even more, the land lease, the taxes, so maybe the date can be changed. You also have people that inherit houses. Should they have to forfeit their houses? No. Rockport is a community that is diverse. The other unintended consequences that people should be aware of is what's going to happen to businesses. Because if everyone was here for the last meeting, everybody learned that Whistle Stop is a residential zone. So those are not residences. Their taxes will increase. And I can almost guarantee that the property and the rent that's going to be charged there will go up. How many businesses in Bearskin Neck will have increased rents? So what happens to the town of Rockport that John's trying to preserve? I think we need to vote no against this. Thank you.
Reynolds Stevens, 103 Marmion.
Right up to the microphone. Really project.
Reynolds Stevens, 103 Marmion. So I would vote no again for this because, one, we already have a very simple tax and fair flat system, which is you pay for the value of your assessment of your home. So that's very easy to do. What's proposed is basically a 4-part tax system, resident, non-resident, high assessment, low assessment. Makes no sense. And also those people who aren't here full time, they pay their full taxes, but they actually don't utilize all the services such as sewer, et cetera, that they pay for but don't actually use, which is really important because our sewer systems, et cetera, are already fairly taxed. Thank you.
Charlie Seavey, 18 Frank Street, and you'll notice I moved off the Government Bylaws Committee table when this came up. So this is just me, not from the committee. I suspect I'm swimming against the tide here. Somebody earlier mentioned that the town has an obligation to citizens. And what the Mass Department of Revenue says about the tax exemption is it shifts the tax burden within the residential class from owners of moderately valued residential properties to the owners of vacation homes, higher valued homes, and residential properties not occupied by the owner. Now, judging from what I've seen on social media, your property has to be valued at about $1 million before you start having to pay more in taxes. I'm having a hard time believing that anybody who's got $1 million property can't afford a few extra pennies. Somebody said earlier today the town has an obligation to its citizens. And I think the permanent residents, the working people of this town deserve a break rather than continuing to cater to the 1% people with more money than sense. In the end, are we members of a community, or are we just staff at a quaint New England village theme park? Thank you.
We're going to hear from the front, then we'll go back to the back.
Denise Donnelly, 72 Pigeon Hill Street. If only it were true that we could pass this one article and the Board of Selectmen could act on it, it would solve all the problems that John articulated, and I mean that sincerely, if only it were true. I think, unfortunately, that this kind of change would have many unintended consequences, and not least of which is what it would do to people like me. I'm a landlady, and my renter, my sister, is sitting here in the audience. Sorry, Lisa, but I would raise your rent. And she's my sister. But I would have to raise her rent because I live on a fixed income, and I can't afford to pay any more. So there are many unintended consequences that we can learn from other towns where this has been passed. I think the other thing to remember is that right now, people who live in higher value homes already pay more than people who live in moderately priced homes because of the way that tax assessment works. It's important to understand that this is not a change that would be without administrative burden. The assessor's office would have to hire a full-time employee to administer this provision, because this changes. Your house could be under the exemption amount one year and over the exemption amount the next year, and it would have to be calculated year by year. You would have to be notified if you qualify, notified that you no longer qualify. So I will leave it to the Finance Committee to explain to us what adding a full-time employee means to the town budget. It's not simply the salary, it's the benefits, it's the retiree health insurance, it's the retirement benefit. The value of one full-time employee is probably going to affect your tax rate. Finally, the point I want to leave with is the one Sarah made. This is a community, and we don't need more ways to divide ourselves. I don't want to live next to someone and wonder if they're paying more than I am, or look it up, and it doesn't feel like a community thing to do. Thank you.
We'll hear from the back, then we'll hear from Pat in the front.
June Michaels, 22 Landmark Lane. I have 2 comments and 2 technical questions. The first technical question for the town treasurer, the town finance director, is that when we calculate the tax rate, we don't base it on the entire assessment, do we? We base it on the entire assessment minus any exemptions or rebates, so that if people all take a large rebate, that is figured in, and so the tax base is smaller and the tax rate goes up. Am I correct in that calculation?
You'll get an answer in a few moments, but keep going.
So the next comment I would like to make is that we know from our experience with Long Beach that when people wanted to vote in the town meeting, they could claim residency for their cottage, because you don't have to live 6 months plus a day in a place for it to be your residency. You can choose any property you want, even one on a golf course, to be your residency. I'd like to make the comment that I agree it is unfair to have a higher rate for people with vacation homes because they are not sending school children to us. And the most expensive thing you can do as a citizen is send school children to us. And finally, I would like to ask a question of the Finance Committee before we make some final decisions, and that is, have they considered the impact on the median homeowner price, someone below the median by a couple of thousand, and someone with a large $1 million home? Have they looked at what the individual impact would be? Have they looked at the idea, suppose half of the 70% of the people in the town take the exemption, and half of the 30% declare that their vacation home is their residency and they take the exemption, what happens then to the tax rate?
Okay, we'll hear from Pat, and then we'll hear from, I believe, Liz.
Pat Brown, 27 Haven Avenue. Many of you know who, as the retired town clerk, that presently I am living on a fixed income. This is something very new to me since May, and reality has set hold of me in how it is to live on a fixed income. I have lived in Rockport for 42 years. I moved here with 2 small children and my husband, and we bought a house that was a wreck of a house that we renovated and worked hard to resell in 5 years. We doubled our money and took that money, bought a piece of land and built a house on it. And I was lucky enough to live in that house for 35 years. Then my husband died. My sister had a house in Rockport, and I had a house in Rockport, and I hated living alone. So we built a new house. We built it handicap-proof. We built it with geothermal heat. We built it with solar panels. We took the money from 2 homes and put it in one home that was the home of our dreams that we could retire in. I am on a fixed income. The house is well over the quota of where I should be. The reason why I was able to build that house was I worked hard all my life to do so. I want to stay there. I don't want to go anywhere. My monthly tax bill for a new home in Rockport is over $1,000 a month. The house is worth a lot of money, but I'm not going anywhere. How much do I owe on it? Not very much. But this is directed directly at me, saying you will pay more money than anyone else sitting in this audience because your house is worth more money. Anyone building a new house today, your house is going to be over $1 million. That's the cost of what it is to build a house. And if you look at your own assessment, I tried to get an assessment. It's down. We can't see how our houses are assessed. I think you'd be very surprised to see that your house is headed towards $1 million. That's because this is where we live. And many of us who have lived here this long, you're living in a house that's worth more money today than when you bought it. A lot more money. And I just want to say, vote no for this. I haven't worked all my life to live in Rockport, to be able to afford to live in Rockport, and to die in Rockport. That's what I choose to do. Thank you.
Hi. To address your question about the way you qualify, the tax levy stays the same. So the amount to be collected doesn't change. The burden shifts. The exemption comes off the assessed value, and everyone, if it's adopted, pays that residential, that same rate. The rate will go up, yes, substantially.
My name is Chrissy Roberts. I live on Popplestone Lane, and I'm finding myself very frustrated at this, listening to all of this conversation. People are talking about the fact that people can't afford to live here anymore. The fact is that houses today are selling for $3 million. The house just sold on the corner of Eden Road for $3.9 million. The house across the street from me just sold for $2.8 million. They bought it for $700,000. So what we're seeing is people are selling their houses for top dollar. They're getting cash for their houses. They're doing it without inspections. This is real estate. This is what's happening. When we first moved to Rockport almost 30 years ago, we had 2 children. We were traveling from Maine to Beverly to bring our children to school. This was our dream. We moved onto Eden Road to Popplestone Lane. Our taxes doubled to $20,000 a year for a condo. I am struggling with the fact that we have done nothing outside of our house to add any value to the house. You wouldn't drive by my house and say, wow, they just added a $500,000 addition. But we're being penalized because of something we have no control over. The town value keeps going up, and it's going to go up. This is the new Nantucket. I keep hearing it from all my friends. Rockport is the place to be. They're going to drive the people who love this town out. You have to stop at some point. We cannot keep taking money from people because of something that's out of our control. The assessment of my house is out of my control. It's out of everyone's control. We cannot be punished because we live in such a beautiful place and be forced to have to be worrying. I've been sick over this for a week, wondering what's going to happen to my family because I can't afford another $3,000 a year for my taxes. And everyone needs to seriously consider what is going on in this town. We are a community. This is the most wonderful town in the world, but we can't keep spending our way and spending our way and spending our way to try to save the little shred of community that we have. People want to live here. People don't want to leave. What's going to happen to the elderly that are on fixed income that are living in their father's homes? There's a lot of people in this town who have their family home. They're going to be forced out by taxes. They're set a certain spending budget, and they can't think of how. I know people in this town who are over 70 years old that are looking for jobs right now. And we have to start being considerate of the elderly and the families that just cannot be squeezed any longer. I'm voting no.
Remember, for all of you people who are getting sick over this, this is a non-binding article. It's just the sense of the meeting, essentially. It's important, but please don't get sick over it.
Good evening, 29 Long Beach, Heather Carboni. I do live in a community of 154 cottages that has a stipulation of occupancy from April 1st to November 30th. We are not allowed on the beach for the 4 months. It was a 6 months, and they elongated it by a couple of months. So under this provision of Article G, we are not allowed to be exempt from this because we are not allowed to be living in your community as of January 1st. Being that said, there are a good percentage, I'd say 40 to 45% of the cottage owners, that this is their primary residence. It is not their secondary home. I do not want to see these people forced out of their homes. As everyone before me has said, we are a community. We are a fantastic community. Rockport is a wonderful place to live, and I do understand the idea of getting the speculators and the investors that are just in here throwing around a lot of money not being a community. And that is something that is happening all over the world, not just here in Rockport. So I would vote no to Article G, even though it is non-binding. I appreciate Sarah Wilkinson's words of what she has communicated on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. I commemorate Ruth George for everything she does for the CPC and for her advocacy to getting affordable housing in this community. And if we can get together and be more of a community, don't be divided. Do what's right so that all of you citizens that have been living here, I've only been here since 2008. My father-in-law and his family have been here since the early 1900s. Let's not destroy this community. Let's build it up and make it stronger.
Please state your name. Come to the microphone.
Alan Macmillan, 18 Story Street, Pigeon Cove. Move the question, please.
Okay, to move the question, that's non-debatable. It requires a 2/3 vote. So if you want to end debate and just vote on this issue, you're going to press 1 or A. If you want to keep talking about it, you're going to press 2 or B. Want to make sure that we're ready here? We are ready. So we're moving the question. If you want to end discussion and go right to a vote, you're going to press 1 or A. If you want to keep discussing this issue, you're going to press 2 or B. Starting now. Okay, that motion carries. 79% is greater than 2/3. 61% opposed. 173 to 47. So now we are going to vote on the question. So the question, this non-binding issue, if you want to request that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5C, the residential tax exemption, which we're discussing, you're going to press 1 or A, and if you don't want to do so, you are going to press 2 or B, starting now. That motion fails. 25% in favor, 75% opposed. 54 to 164. And we now move on to our miscellaneous bylaw issue. If you happen to be leaving, if you can do so quietly. And return your clickers, and thank you for participating. Yeah, we'll take a minute. Everybody stretch your legs. In 30 seconds. Hey, Gary. Oh, yeah. Laurie, you ready? We're now about to start the third half of our town meeting. A subject that's very near and dear to my heart. When I first moved back to this community from the Navy, I joined the Government and Bylaw Committee, not knowing what it was all about, and soon joined by my colleague, Lori Kaiser, and now here we are discussing it again. In a few moments, we're going to start with Article H. We're then going to go to Article N, and then take the rest of these in order. If you're expecting a lot of amendments and changes, you are going to be disappointed. These are very tightly written. It would be fun to sit here all night and to change all of our bylaws and add things and subtract things, but unfortunately we can't do that. The Government and Bylaw Committee met on multiple occasions, solicited input from everybody, and they came up with the edits that they have come up with, and we're only going to be talking about those. It's going to be a rather narrow subject matter. We do have a bylaw in Chapter 2 of our bylaws that said if you wanted to amend something, when practical, you were supposed to have given me those amendments 48 hours before the meeting. It's Toby's favorite bylaw, but I have received some, we've acted upon some, so if you intend on others, I am going to ask you why it wasn't practical to get them to us beforehand, because as you can imagine, to stop the meeting, to vet everything, to see what's lawful and what isn't, is a huge undertaking. So in the future, if you see something on the warrant and you want to amend it, get it to us, and then we vet it. We send it out to council, we send it out to the interested persons, and then we can really act on it and save the meeting time and do this effectively. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Lori Kaiser.
Good evening to all of those who have actually stayed to listen to us. I'm Lori Kaiser and chair of the Government and Bylaw Committee. As many of you know, one of the Government and Bylaw Committee's jobs is to periodically review the General Code of Bylaws and bring suggested updates to the town meeting for a vote. Tonight, we are going to bring you just a few of these bylaws because the whole set of bylaws would have been overwhelming. I am not going to take up any town meeting time to give you a detailed report on our committee or the work that we have done on these bylaws. If you are interested, please refer to my report as chair in the voters booklet at page 48 for further details on who we are, what our process has been, and what the public input has been, and further information on the remaining bylaws. Before I describe how we're going to proceed tonight, I did want to remind all of us of the significance of our bylaws. This document is our social contract. And what I mean by this is that this document represents the agreements we have collectively made as citizens over many years and what the choices we have made on how to govern ourselves. And while our choices are, of course, often limited by state law, because state law dictates many of our choices, we have made major decisions that impact our lives. As we proceed tonight, I hope you gain an appreciation for the work that past generations of Rockporters have done, and enjoy the fact that our updates will continue to make this document relevant to our lives and those of future generations. And as far as how we're going to proceed tonight, we have divided our bylaws into separate warrant articles. A member of our committee will present the highlights of each article before you consider it. And to start us off with Article H will be Penny Pilzer, Vice Chair of our committee.
Mr. Moderator, Government and Bylaw Committee Vice Chair Penny Pilzer moves that the town approve Article H as printed in the September 12, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen supports this article, and Government and Bylaw Committee reports favorably on this article.
Seconded. Moved and seconded. Good evening, Penny.
Good evening to you, too, and to everyone. You can hear me, I guess. This is a pretty straightforward article. We would like to call the Board of Selectmen the Select Board. This is because a lot of our selectmen are not men. And we're going to try to go to gender neutral when possible, and we would be joining over 100 other communities in Massachusetts in doing so. It's just a matter of accuracy from my point of view.
You've heard the motion. Any discussion? All right, get your clicker. If you're in favor, you're going to press 1 or A. And if you're opposed, you're going to press 2 or B. Starting now. The motion passes 88% to 12%. (65-9). The chair will now entertain a motion under Article N. We're skipping ahead to N for November. It logically fits. You'll see why in a moment.
Mr. Moderator, Government and Bylaw Committee Chair Lori Kaiser moves that the town approve Article N as printed in the September 12, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen support this article, and Government and Bylaw Committee reports favorably on this article.
Okay, Lori.
Okay.
Moved and seconded.
Article N, which is on page 36 of your booklet, is a cleanup article. This will empower the Government and Bylaw Committee to make minor changes to fix typos, spelling errors, etc., without the need for town meeting to use floor amendments to fix the problems. So if we pass Article N, this means that if you find an error tonight, you don't need to stand up, point it out, and move to amend it. Instead, you can just report the error to the Government and Bylaw Committee after the meeting, and we will make the necessary change. And any such changes made this way will be reported at the next town meeting in the Government and Bylaw Chair's report. We will always have a record of the changes.
And I believe they'll be available at the town clerk's office as well? Just agree? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, any discussion? You've heard the motion. All those in favor, press 1 or A, and opposed, 2 or B. Starting now. All right, that motion carries, just barely though. 96% in favor and 4% opposed. 70 to 3. We now go back to I.
Mr. Moderator, Government and Bylaw Committee Chair Lori Kaiser moves that the town approve Article I as printed in the September 12th, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen supports this article. Government and Bylaw Committee reports favorably on this article.
Okay. Article I suggests a number of changes to Chapter 1 of the Bylaws, but I'm only going to explain 5 of these changes because I believe the rest are self-explanatory. It should take me about 5 minutes to walk you through them, and it will be easier to understand if you follow along with Article I as printed in your voter book at page 5. The first change I'm going to discuss is under Section 2, Definition of Terms. Look at subsection A. We standardized all citations to the Massachusetts general laws using the abbreviation M period, G period, L period. We did it for a reason, and that is so that you can copy and paste the site into your search engine, and it will link you directly to the state statute. Next change, just below in subsection B, as in boy. Here we suggest that all references to town officers be gender neutral. We accomplished this by a simple device. We eliminated the pronouns he, she, him, and her, and just substituted the title of the town officer in its possessive form. For example, we now say the director's duties instead of his or his/her duties. Sometimes we substituted the word person when it made sense. The next change, under subsection C, we have cleaned up some definitions and defined a few more words. For instance, the abbreviation for Spring Town Meeting, also known as Annual Town Meeting, is ATM, which is not to be confused with Spring Town Meeting, STM. More importantly, we define the word cause as in the removal for cause, which appears in several places throughout the bylaws, but it was never defined. So if you will scroll down to the word cause at Roman numeral 3, you will see that we have added a standard definition of cause, which you can read for yourself. This, by the way, has been reviewed by Town Council. And also under these definitions, town bulletin boards now include the town website because the website was designated by the Board of Selectmen a few years ago as the official place for notifications and is therefore an official bulletin board. We also defined town website. Now the last 2 changes require a bit more explanation. Under Section 6, Public Meetings, you will notice that we added a subparagraph B, as in boy. This new subparagraph is meant to address 2 problems that were pointed out to us by Tom Barrett of the Finance Committee, who, by the way, helped us draft this new language. First problem is that we are currently posting meeting notices for committees in one big electronic file on the town website instead of in individual files for each committee's posting. What this means is that when you want to find a particular committee meeting and their agenda, you click on town meeting notices and then scroll down a long list. The problem with this is that you cannot use a calendar program to download posted dates to your phone or your computer. So this bylaw update would now require individual postings, which will work with a calendar program and a program that will be coming soon to our website. The other problem that Mr. Barrett pointed out was that we are not saving the posts on the town website, but instead are overwriting the old material with new posts each week. This means you cannot go back on the web page and find prior week's notices with their attached agendas. Mr. Barrett suggested keeping the meeting post on the website for 18 months for convenience of the public, and we adopted his suggestion. And if you read the last sentence in this subsection B, we also address the problem of handling paper posts. As Tobias Sinian correctly pointed out to us, you cannot keep 18 months of paper postings on a physical bulletin board. And therefore, the suggestion of 2 weeks posted and the rest filed with the town clerk. Now we're down to the last change, and this is actually kind of a big deal. We have a huge problem in the town with getting our meeting minutes completed in a timely fashion as required by the open meeting law. And in addition, we do not require that they are kept in a centralized place, so it is sometimes hard to find them. So Government Bylaw Committee is recommending that we change our current procedure from just notifying the town clerk that a meeting was held on a certain date and keeping the minutes in the committee's own files to just filing the actual document with the town clerk. And as for the moment, while we are waiting for the new updated software for our town website, which will create a centralized, searchable database, we are saying just file them with the town clerk in any manner you want. Email them, snail mail them, hand deliver, or just post them on the website. For now, just get them to the town clerk. And doing this will solve our immediate problem, and also it'll make it easier to tie into the new website software when it comes along. And as far as solving the problem of getting our volunteer committees to actually write the minutes in the first place, the town has hired clerks that are assisting the busier committees to write their meeting minutes and to file them on the website in the time frame required by the open meeting law. Other than spelling out the actual time frame required by the open meeting law in Section 7 of this bylaw, the Government and Bylaw Committee is taking a wait-and-see position to see if the use of clerks solves the problem. Thank you.
Awesome job. Any comments? Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alan McMillan, 18 Story Street. Just a kind of a humorous question, and I see our chief is standing over here. Are we now expected to call men who wear blue uniforms and carry a gun police persons, and people who show up to put out a fire persons? My point is we seem to be going overboard on gender issues here, and I'm not the only one in this audience who thinks that. Thank you.
All righty. Pat?
Seems to me that the responsibility of much of this is going to the town clerk, when in fact we, in the past, put the responsibility on our committees. I can tell you that as the town clerk, I sent out memos all the time, asking for minutes of committees. And we kept that on a spreadsheet. And out of all the town's committees, we might have had a response from 3. I'm asking a question of the Bylaw Committee. Who's going to police this? Who's
the policemen, officers.
And the fact that there's going to be a massive spreadsheet at this time, the town clerk does not keep minutes of other bodies. They keep their own minutes and town meeting minutes. And where do you suggest all of these minutes be kept? Will they be paper or will they all be electronic?
Those are all very good questions. And when these are, first of all, to answer the last one first, is this was all going to be moving to an electronic database. And that's going to be happening over time. We're working on it from the town to get that done. And as far as policing it, this is the issue that we have. And what we're trying to do by using clerks is that the clerks are going to be responsible for getting the minutes in. So we're hoping, as far as, there really isn't any obligation of the town clerk to go and get them. It will be the committee's obligation to do it, but we will be hopefully giving them some support so that it's, and to train them.
You've heard the motion. If you are in favor, this requires a 2/3 vote, I believe. Just a majority. If you are in favor, you're going to press 1 or A, and if you are opposed, you're going to press 2 or B, starting now. And that motion carries 79% to 21%, or 52 to 14. We move on.
Mr. Moderator, Article J, Government and Bylaw Committee Member Charlie Seavey moves that the town approve Article J as printed in the September 12, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen support this article, and Government and Bylaw Committee report favorably on this article.
Seconded.
I don't want you holding it against me on these things just because I supported Article G. Okay, this is a whole different ball of wax. All these are on, starting on page 10 of the warrant. A lot of what we did with Chapter 2 was the same sort of cleanup things that we've done with all the other articles. And the only comments I've got here, we did add a new section specifying that town meeting is the legislative body of town government, which I think is sort of long been understood but was never actually written down anywhere in the bylaws. And there was an amendment floating around to change some of the language, but the language that I used is drawn directly from session law and has passed through the Attorney General's office many, many times. There is an explanation in the slides back on. Everything that we pass in here, everything that the BOS passes, has to be approved by an office within the State Attorney General's office, and if they don't like the language, it doesn't work. So the language that we used in that article, the new Article 1 in Chapter 2, right straight out of being blessed by all the above. We did eliminate the chair of the Finance Committee. There's a nominating committee that produces this. Bob doesn't just bully people into doing this, although he did that to me. I was buying a house at the time, and I figured it was better not to argue with him if I wanted to get the house done. Anyway, we substituted the town clerk. I asked Pat Brown beforehand. She said yes, and Melanie hasn't threatened me yet, so I'm assuming it's okay with her. Mainly, I wanted to get the whole nominating committee to be elected officials. There's also the bit in there, it clarifies that all resolutions by state law are non-binding. That, I think, is not widely understood. We went back and forth a little bit ago about that. It's so much of what's in here in the bylaws, so much of it is governed by what state law says, and sometimes it's not always obvious. This is one of them. Let's see, town, we already did that, and the bylaw committee members may be removed for cause being unspecified or undefined, but there it is. Any questions?
We have somebody at the mic, and then we'll get to other people. Yes, sir.
Jonathan Ring, 9 Pools Lane. Why are we getting rid of church bells in this bylaws? Is there a reason? I mean, it seems like it should still be in.
Why church bells? Is that the question, as opposed to just bells?
Yeah, the church bells, it's eliminating church bells. Section 3, town meeting. I'm sorry, Section 2,
issue.
Articles, Section 2C.
I know where it is.
You're talking over each other. We have it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I got the question. The church bell issue got a little emotional. It was one of the very few things that we had what might be construed as an argument about. Nobody has rung bells for town meetings since I was a kid back in the 50s. Some members of the committee thought we should just throw out the whole bylaw or that section of the bylaw because it's totally irrelevant. Other people who won the vote said, no, it's part of tradition, and we just did take the word church out to get religion out of it. And that's the whole story behind the church bell thing.
We could someday have a synagogue.
Are there any other bells in town but church bells?
At present, there are only churches. I've heard that there may be a synagogue coming to town, but it has not yet.
So why eliminate the term?
He's already provided the answer to that. It's late. Let's go on. Yes, sir?
Peter Vandermark, 12 Bay Ridge Lane. Just a comment on the church bells.
Can you get right up to that microphone and really project?
My understanding is that the bells in the Congregational Church are the town's, is the town's bell. But my comment is on the fact that in several places the term Board of Selectmen is used, and in one place it's the Select Board of Selectmen. And so this ought to be modified to use the new terminology.
Well, we had to write some of these before we got approval on the others. That has to come back from the state, so the power to make these edits will cover all of that.
Exactly.
Any other questions? You've heard the motion. All those in favor, press 1 or A. Opposed, 2 or B, starting now. %91 in favor, 9% opposed. The numbers? 58-6. That motion carries. We move on to Article K as in kilo.
Mr. Moderator, Government and Bylaw Committee Member Charlie Seavey moves the town approve Article K as printed in the September 12, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen supports this article, and Government and Bylaw Committee reports favorably on this article.
Okay, set to go.
Bingo. Okay, probably the two big things in Chapter 3, as Toby has pointed out many, many times, and I know from long experience in library land, not everybody is hooked up online, even though there's an assumption on the part of far too many people that it's all online and it's immediately accessible. So one of the things we did was differentiate between the electronic copies, which will be on the town website, which, hallelujah, is being improved. Mitch probably hates me for even mentioning that. And paper copies are always going to be available at the town clerk's office, although you may have to pay a copying charge. Now, to add to this, I have to point out that Rockport Public Library has 9 terminals. available to get at the web, and a staff that is more than willing to help. I've had discussions with the library director and a couple of people on the staff on this, and it's not as if there aren't computers available for free to get at all that stuff. The other thing we did was recommend that the town clerk be given power to edit town documents so that links, URLs, and names of federal and state agencies can change as presidents and governors rearrange agencies. Now, this isn't as true as it used to be, but the old thing in computer land used to be that the shelf life of a URL was about 45 days. That's not, as I said, quite as true, but they do change. People jigger around with their websites and their servers and all that, and what is in effect may change at a moment. And as I trust everybody realizes that governors and presidents take great joy in rearranging federal agencies and changing names and all that. And it struck the committee as silly that we put these things in there, and technically to change the name, we'd have to go back to town meeting to get permission to do so. This is really just basically editorial changing and trying to make sure that everybody gets the right thing. So if you plug in an old URL, you won't, you'll get a 404 and that'll be the end of it, and you'll go say what. So now the town clerk's office has the power to change that stuff without having to go back. Because it's in the bylaw, town meeting doesn't have to approve it. It's just really trying to improve information access. Any questions? Toby.
Hey, that's my job, Charlie. Toby. That's why I get the big dollars.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. It's perfectly reasonable to, update the bylaws and without the rigmarole of coming here on things that are technical. You would hope, though, that there would be some mercy for those who are not hooked up to computers, and the announcement made at Board of Selectmen's meetings that the Mass General Law citations had been changed. If you bought a physical copy of the bylaws, nobody would give you notice of that, and it would be minimal trouble for the clerk to post those on the bulletin board. I can't offer such amendments here at this town meeting because of the way it was structured, and it would be also reasonable for the Board of Selectmen to announce those at a public meeting. I have two amendments to this section to offer. An Article K, and we're now on page 16. Chapter 3, Annual Town Elections. It reads, the annual town election to fill elected town offices and to determine any matters that might be determined by referendum election shall be held a Tuesday in May or June as scheduled by the Board of Selectmen. And they have added the words, except that such date may be delayed in a state of emergency in the manner prescribed by law. I move to delete those words, except that such a date may be delayed in a state of emergency in the manner prescribed by law. Imagine for a moment that I occupy the castle in Washington, and I don't wish to leave the castle. So I declare an emergency, and you're now going to have an emergency rather than an election. Well, could that happen here? I tend to think not. The Board of Selectmen don't have a castle, although they do have a moat, that being the electronic meetings, the Zoom meetings, so that the public can't get at them, or can't get at them so readily. But you don't want to be delaying elections. Let's say it's a nice day and we're going to go out for a picnic, but now it rains, no picnic. An election is not like that. An election is something that is basic to a democracy, and you don't delay it. You go forward with it, hell or high water. So this is only an invitation to trouble, and we should dispense with it. I have offered the motion. I hope we will consider it and vote on it, and I then have a second motion to offer under this article. Thank you.
All right, we'll deal with the first. And here to give us the drawbridge, our town council.
Darren Klein, KP Law, through the moderator. I'm not really sure about the castle references, but taking the language out of the proposed bylaw amendment that Toby seeks to do through the amendment, it would not have any bearing. If the governor, by special act or special legislation, decides to empower cities and towns to delay the election because of a state of emergency, regardless of what your bylaws say, the town will have that right. So the purpose of the change being recommended by the bylaw committee is so that you know that if a governor or the legislature decides to enact such emergency legislation, that would trump what's in the bylaws. So, in my opinion, Toby's amendment would have no legal standing at all.
Poor choice of words, Darren, but thank you. All right, you've heard the motion to amend. Anyone want to talk about the motion to amend? Pat.
I tend to agree with Toby in this case because the addition of these words are generally a moot point. The governor is going to tell us what to do. We've already been through this with COVID. We weren't able to have our town meeting in a timely manner. We weren't able to have our election as the bylaw stated, and we already overrode that with the governor's permission. In this case, we're giving the Board of Selectmen the authority to leave the governor out of it. I don't feel that we need to add this language to the bylaws. I think the bylaws were fine just the way they were.
All right, anyone else want to talk about the amendment? The amendment only. John?
Jonathan Ring, 9 Pools Lane. Town meeting requires 150 people for a quorum. Are we below that, and can town meeting still continue below the quorum level?
My bylaws don't read that way. I don't think we have a quorum for this meeting, but no quorum. All right, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of that amendment, which is to take out those words in bold, press 1. Oh, wait a minute, we're waiting for a connection. We have no connection.
Do a hand vote.
Are we good? All right, only on my side. All right, all those in favor of this amendment to take out those words, press 1 or A, and all those opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. Does that pass or fail? That motion fails, and I'll get you the numbers in just a second. 40% were in favor, 60% were against it, and yes, 23, and no, 34. So now we're back to the original motion, and I think Toby has yet another amendment. But they can only deal, they had to have been given to me 48 hours ahead of time, and they can only deal with the words in bold or the cross-out words.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street, and the moral of that is if you wish to have a say in the bylaws as they go forward, you need to attend the Government and Bylaw Committee meetings and make your opinions known, because by the time you get here, it is, to put it impolitely, restricted or rigged. You get to choose what the Government and Bylaw Committee has offered or what is there already. There is no other course. So I will offer one more amendment to this section. This is section 2, hours of voting. I'll read it and then the amendment. During all annual town elections, the polls shall open at 7 a.m. and shall remain open until 8 p.m. And here are the words: unless otherwise voted by the Board of Selectmen at least 30 in parentheses, days prior to the date of the election. However, those who arrive by 8 p.m. shall be allowed to vote. The amendment is to delete the words unless otherwise voted by the Board of Selectmen at least 30 days prior to the date of the election. Well, it's an emergency, and now we're going to cut the hours of voting. I don't think that sounds right or reasonable. If you have to know 30 days beforehand to set this in motion, it may be an emergency. It is also the new normal, and you should be able to line up enough people to man the polls. There are 3 shifts at the polls. One to start with, running you halfway through the day, another to continue, and then all of the people come in and count the votes. Melanie kindly explained it to me this morning. But in plain truth, the people don't do it for the wage, which is minimum wage. They do it out of love and devotion and a sense of duty. And if they once come in, they'll stay there with sore bottoms and bored to tears right to the end if necessary, if you can't get the people to man the polls. So this is another way to curb your rights at voting. It's a mistake. We've managed just fine up to this point without it, and we'll manage just fine next week, next month, next year without it. Please consider the amendment.
Anyone want to speak to this? Oh, Pat. If you want to.
Pat Brown, 27 Haven Avenue. I am in total agreement with Toby's amendment. We know for years and years and years that the polls are open from 7 to 8. If someone is allowed to change those hours, and by the way, you could only do it for the local election, you couldn't do it for a state election, because that's run by state law. And state law is that we're open from 7 to 8. And that's what everyone knows. People commute on the train, people go in vote early, people go in and vote late, some people are there at 8 o'clock, some people are there at 7 o'clock in the morning, but they know they have those hours, 7 to 8. Communication in this town isn't always the best. 30 days is not a long time to let people know that the hours are going to change. I know when I changed polling places, I had to send a postcard to every person voting in that precinct so that they knew where to go to vote. Now, if we get knowledge of a change in time 30 days prior, are we going to get notified by mail through the Board of Selectmen that the times that the local election has changed and we need to be there earlier or later? I'm not in agreement with this. I think our poll times are set, 7 to 8, and they should remain that way.
Laurie. Nice and loud and nice and close.
Okay. Laurie McKenna, 31 High Street. My reaction to this is why do we need this? Like, I think the polls work fine the way they are. So I would like, my inclination is to vote with Toby and have this bold dropped. But first, I would like to ask the committee, why did you want to include this? Like, what problem were you trying to solve by introducing this new language?
Mr. Klein.
Darren Klein, through the moderator from KP Law. The purpose of the amendment and the legal reasoning behind it is this just gives the select board the ability and the flexibility to change the hours if it is deemed necessary by whatever situation is facing the town. I mean, obviously, as we look at these bylaws, we've faced some things in the last few years that nobody could have anticipated. The world is changing. The demographics of the town are always changing. This just gives the board flexibility to make adjustments so as many people as possible can vote.
Sure. Melanie Waddell, our incumbent town clerk.
I just wanted to say that in an effort to avoid confusion, I also believe that the polling hours should stay the same and be consistent with both state and federal voting hours.
All right, you have heard the motion. All those in favor of Toby's amendment, press 1 or A, and all those opposed, press 2 or B, starting now. That motion passes 76% to 24%, 48 to 15. We're now back to this motion as amended with those words stricken. Anything else? Okay, if you are in favor of this motion, press 1 for A, and if you are opposed, press 2 for B, starting now. And that motion passes 93% to 7%. 55 to 4. And we now move on to Article L. Is that correct? L for Lima.
Yep. Mr. Moderator, Government and Bylaw Committee Vice Chair Penny Pilser moves that the town approve Article L as printed in the September 12th, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee support this article. Government and Bylaw Committee reports favorably on this article.
Seconded. Penny, Penny, Penny. It'll take a while.
whatever you say, I guess. I'll try to run through this before everybody falls asleep, running through it before everyone falls asleep. Basically, what we did, most of what we did here was clean up and making things consistent. If you read through it, it's on page 27. The whole article starts on page 27. I think you can understand most of the reasons why we made the mistakes, why we made the changes we made, but there are a few that are worth mentioning. Chapter 7A, Section 2A, specifies that the school committee will, rather than posting a summary of the school budget or posting where they're going to have the summary of the school budget in a newspaper, we're thinking that we should have it posted on the town website and make paper copies available through the town clerk and the superintendent of schools, and also notify people in any other way that they deem appropriate. Town council suggested that this was the requirement to have a newspaper publication Many towns are getting away from this now, and that actually many more people are likely to check out the town website rather than for information about what's going on in the town and the school committee than in a printed newspaper. To Section 2B, we added a provision that the school committee meetings are governed by state open meeting laws and that vote shall be by roll call. And again, these were suggestions from town council. We've also amended another part, which I will get to make sure that all town governmental entities are going to be following the open meeting law and make sure that they have their minutes and everything. But this is just in addition to make it clear. Section 3 now states, and this is probably the biggest substantive provision that we changed, it now states the due date for the select board to submit a proposed town budget to the finance committee will now be February 15th rather than January 31st. And the reason for this is because there are a couple of big items in the budget, the health insurance premium and the amount of the state aid, that is generally we don't know until sometime in the first or second week of February. And so we put in, somebody guesses, puts in a number, and everybody then has to kind of switch things around based on these numbers that we knew weren't going to be correct in the first place. So we just thought, okay, let's give everybody a chance to have the real numbers when the select board submits the budget. Section 14A requires that tax delinquents be reported periodically as well as annually, and this is because some purposes, some part of the government may want to know the list of tax delinquents at a different time or want a different regular time. And so we just thought that there should be some flexibility in that. There are some in Section 14E, there are several obsolete exceptions from the licensing and permit rules. For example, child work permits are simply no longer issued. You just follow Mass General Law and federal laws to child labor, and bicycle permits are no longer being issued. And in Chapter 7B, Section 1, finally, requires all town officials, boards, commissions, and committees to keep records consistent with the requirements of the Public Records Law, MGL 2.66, in other words, the open meeting law, and post them on the town website. This includes the town minutes, and Lori explained to you why we thought the minutes should be on the town website. And that's it. Easy peasy.
Questions? Yes.
Alan Macmillan, 18 Story Street, Pigeon Cove. I guess I'm going to speak for Toby and others in the community. Way back there on page 27, section 2, when we're talking about a public hearing, the school committee shall be, and then they blanked out publishing in a local newspaper. There are people here who are not glued to the screen, the glowing screen every day. Thank you. And 25% of the community still reads the newspaper, and that's an important place to see what's going on in the town. So I would not be in favor of eliminating publishing a school newspaper. The only reason I'm pretty sure that that's being done is to save some money. Has nothing to do with what's good for the community, in my opinion. So I'm voting against. Actually, I'd like to make an amendment, if I may.
48 hours?
I'd just like to make an amendment to keep that Section 8, Section 2, Part A, to include to be published in a local newspaper. If you go down to J, It said the times and places where complete copies of the budget shall be available for examination by the public and the date, time, etc. You still have the language in there that covers the newspaper, but you're eliminating the newspaper. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, it's, whoa. What's that? Okay. All right. The Government Bylaw Committee waived any objection as to the timeliness of that amendment, so we'll hear the amendment. What's that? Any objection to restoring the language published in a local newspaper? In addition to the other language? Yeah, just deleting that deletion. Any objection to that? Okay, well, that amendment will pass then by unanimous vote. So now we have the local newspaper is back. Hooray. Anything else? Okay, you have heard the motion as amended, including published in a local newspaper. All those in favor of this, press 1 or A, and opposed 2 or B, starting now. %, in favor, 2% opposed. I say that carries. 53 to 1. And before the clickers, we would know who that was. But we move on.
Mr. Moderator,
Article M.
Mr. Moderator, Government and Bylaw Committee Chair Lori Kaiser moves that the town approve Article M as printed in the September 12th, 2022 town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen support this article. Government and Bylaw Committee reports favorably.
Seconded. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Well, Laurie, you want to talk about it? No. Any discussion? All those in favor, press 1 or A. Opposed, 2 or B. Starting now. Let's see if we can pick up that one. 98% to 2%. 52 to 1. Is there any further business before this meeting? Oh, flu clinic notice. Yes.
Okay, so there is a upcoming flu clinic this Friday at the Community House for seniors and other adult flu vaccines. You can come right on site, or you can sign up online on the town website. That runs from 9 to 12. And there are 2 upcoming COVID vaccine clinics, the 24th from 9 to 11 at the Community House and October 8th from 9 to 11 at the Community House. Again, sign up is on the town website. The vaccinators will have the new bivalent vaccine available.
All right. The chair will entertain a motion to dissolve this meeting. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody.